spend just 2 or 3 minutes talking through what WSF in general has been up to. Obviously, as local residents, a lot of you have said you're interested in the community aspect of what's going on. And we want to say from the outset, this redevelopment is about us being able to do that better. And it's not at all about us trying to run away from any of the community activities that we're doing. So over the past few months, just some of my highlights, some of the things that we've been up to. Our summer, we had a particularly busy summer with a 3-week summer scheme with over 300 different children coming along, with activities for ages 5 to 14. And as well as that, we had 25 young leaders aged 15 to 21 helping us to plan and deliver all of those activities. And it's really lovely that afterwards, actually, some of those young leaders really shone, and we've been able to offer them some sessional work to lead children's arts activities, for example, over the year, so that local people are getting the opportunities that they need to be able to kind of be an active part of the community. Throughout our normal times, kind of during term time, and over the rest of the year, we have youth activities running 5 days a week now across our 2 community centres. So as well as managing Britannia Village Hall, we also manage Royal Wharf Community Dock, which is just literally a 5-minute walk from the Village Hall over the other side of the main road. And between those 2 centres, we have activities 5 days a week for young people, as well as having them 6 days a week for under 5s and their families, all of those things free of cost to everyone that's joining in. And I think for those of you, which is a lot of you that have lived in the community a long time, we're often kind of pigeonholed as a youth organisation, and that is a big part of what we do. We're very passionate about youth and children getting the best opportunities. But we do also have a lot of things on for adults, and that's been a real focus of ours over the past year or two, trying to diversify our activities and the things that we offer to different people. So some of the things we do for adults, we have ESOL classes, 4 classes a week for people of varying levels of English. We have social groups in the evenings for those people that are working during the day and not able to get there, including book clubs and board game clubs, things like that. And activities during the day for adults that aren't at work at those times as well, including breakfast club, gardening, and various different social and exercise groups as well. So those are some of the things that we're up to, and please do look at our website if you want to find out more. My highlight of the year, and I just want to make a quick plug in case anyone's interested in getting involved, has been a mentoring project that we have launched this year, which actually I know some of you were involved in. And we ran it for the first time around in the first half of this year, and we linked up a group of local residents. We had 30 volunteers in total sign up to year 10s at Oasis Academy Silvertown. And we did a mentoring program where they went once a week to meet with this young person. And it was more than just kind of talking in general about life. There was quite specific things to think around CVs, and everyone was matched up very carefully, so they had someone that would do that. We were able to provide local young people with an adult that they wouldn't, a bit more of an idea about what they can be getting up to after school. Oh, sorry, my internet's telling me it's unstable. Do message in the chat if you can't hear me, and I'll turn off my video. Yes. But as well as that, what we found was that actually the mentors that took place really became good friends. And that was really lovely to see the community that was created between the group of adults that took part as well. And I think, to me, that's our community on a good day, when we're able to have very different types of people from the community supporting one another and getting to know one another. That's what we're really passionate about, and what we hope that projects like this will help us to be able to do more and more. So that's enough from me about general WSF. I know that's not the main reason that you came, but yeah, just couldn't resist the chance to tell people about what was going on. And if you're interested in signing up for the mentoring program, it's a 12-week program, and the deadline for applying for this cohort is actually the end of this week. So I'll put the email address in the chat for anyone that might be interested in applying for that. But I'm going to hand over to Dan now to talk more about the redevelopment project itself.
Thanks very much indeed, Helen. And as I say, really good to see you all, and welcome, I think, to Lola, who's also just joined us. I'm just going to run through the where we got up to. I appreciate not everyone has been on that process, so there might be a bit of sort of background here that will hopefully be helpful. If there's some additional questions that you have, then obviously do post them in the chat and we can cover them off. So I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully you can see. Can everyone see that image? Yeah. Okay. Great. So so why we're here tonight, three things really. We want to give you an update to where we got to. We want to answer any questions you might have, and we also want to encourage you to get involved. Ultimately, this is a community-led project. WSF is a community-led organisation, and it will be a better project, and it's much more likely to be successful the more involvement that we can have in all parts of the project. In terms of the detail, what we'll cover off, we'll talk about the timing, what will any redeveloped centre look like, how much will it cost, and who will pay for it, and how do we make changes to the green, which I think last time a lot of people raised those issues. How can you get involved, and what will happen in the next step. So this is a diagram we showed back in February, in fact, actually, and where we had the last sort of public meeting, and it hasn't actually changed hugely in the sense that we're still looking at a reasonably a 5-year process basically, and that's not atypical for the kind of project of this size and complexity to take. And this year we're very much focusing on sort of getting the baseline right. It's going to take us probably into next year to make a planning application, make sure the funding's in place. And then we'll actually sign up a contractor and actually commence on site possibly in 2023, and then actually complete the project in around 2025. At all stages, we'll be looking at significant community participation, and I've also got to put the caveat in, of course, that I think this is subject to things that are beyond the control of the foundation, such as funding and achieving planning consent and other matters as well. So that's the overall timeline. In terms of the process we've been through this year, last time we had one of these public meetings was in February, and we at that point appointed a team. We had architects and other professionals involved, and we met with a whole bunch of stakeholders, including landowners, neighbours, existing users of the centre, existing organisations that are involved, and we then helped them develop the brief and make sure that it was broadly what we thought the broader community wanted. And then we've also formed something called Development Advisory Group, which we met with every month. In fact, on the footprint workshops also twice in that month potentially, through this process of design and financial testing that went on between March and May of this year. And we then prepared some documents to take to the council, which are called pre-application documents, which are essentially us as an applicant saying, if we were to submit something like this, what kind of response, what kind of issues do you have with it? And we'll talk you through what happens as on the basis of that meeting with Newham, and where we're at the moment. So just to be clear, we're still at a relatively early stage, but we have made significant progress since last time. And if you're interested, all those meetings are recorded on the website. There's notes for everything, and some of that information, the timelines and stuff, are also on that website. So if you want to find out what happened in each of those individual meetings, then do have a look. And in fact, I think Christian on the call is actually part of that group. So thanks for coming on tonight as well, Christian. Just to recap where we got to in terms of the start of this project, in a way, was that the existing building is very uninspiring, both internally and externally. It's very low quality, it's hard to heat, it's quite noisy because of the fabric quality. In fact, it was basically built as the sort of cheapest possible way by the original developer, Wimpy, as a planning requirement of delivering the rest of the scheme. We also now know that the nursery, which was incubated and developed in the hall itself, now needs its own dedicated space. At the moment, has to put away every night, And we also know that although the centre's reasonably large, the existing layout means we can't use a lot of it because, for example, the way the toilets are arranged mean that for child protection purposes, we can't use different rooms for different users at the same time, even though they are available. It's starting to look quite tired. We also know that there are changing things happening in the neighbourhood. There are a number of new halls being built at the moment. In fact, one's already potentially available at Royal Wharf Primary School, but also there are 3 new halls coming forward as part of Oasis Silvertown. We also know that the halls at the moment are mainly used in the evening and at weekends, and that's when those school halls will be available for community use. And the foundation itself is actually finalising a management arrangement with those schools so that we can provide access to local people for them. The GP and pharmacy, as I'm sure you well know, have moved on down to Royal Wharf, and therefore that part of the building is not so well used. And we know that fundamentally, if we don't improve the offer, this hall and the building will become less and less used and less viable. So we as a foundation are looking to the future, and we do think that it's really critical that we have a kind of long-term home, a hub, as one of the spaces that we look after and manage in the area. We also talked with lots of residents. We ran a big survey about what sort of needs they wanted for the community spaces, but also what needs they might want for other things for the site. And there was a real unmet need for housing particularly amongst private renters in lower middle incomes. And at the moment, there is no real offer for those people. Even with all the homes being brought forward in the area, those will either be very expensive private flats sold at the very top of the market, or they'll be predominantly social rent homes, which again, unless you're very high up on UM's 25,000 strong list, you're very unlikely to get one. So there is this kind of bunch of people who live in the village and really do want to move locally if they possibly could. So that's the background. The vision that we have, the project vision, is to create a beautiful, flexible and inclusive new community hub and local homes for local people. This is really about making sure, as I say, that we're future-proofing the organisation for the future and creating something that we can all be proud of, frankly, a building that, that we can all enter and feel welcome, rather than just being something that is, frankly, not that great. We also want a dedicated children's nursery, and we also want a much more positive green space. We've all learned through COVID how important gardens and open space are, and currently the whole site is very hard and not very welcoming. But we're also looking at this as part of a wider network that the foundation's involved in, both at Royal Wharf that Helen mentioned, but also the schools and other sites that we'd like to kind of collaborate with. So in terms of the process we went through, so as I said earlier on, we had a number of workshops with the development group, which consisted of people who lived very nearby, like Christian, who's on the call, as well as existing users of the centre, such as Town Nursery and Vibrant Minds After School Club, as well as other people like the GLA and other stakeholders. So we asked our architects to come up with some options. They came up with these 3 options at the very beginning: a kind of taller building at the north end of the site towards Wesley Avenue, and then 2 terraces of lower rise buildings, sort of going east-west across the site there, Evelyn Road at the bottom of the site here. A second option was more focused around a central garden with a nursery in the middle of it, and then 2 perpendicular blocks, kind of 2-storey with a 3 to 4 storey on this edge along Evelyn. And then a third option, which we call Community Corner, which had a sort of street running down north-south in the middle of it, and then all the community uses focused stacked up on top of each other on one building. Once we looked at that in a bit more detail, and we got some feedback, as I say, from residents and from some of our early financial testing, and it became clear that some of those options were better than others. we struggled with this building at the top here in terms of some of its impact on its surroundings and the financial deliverability of that building. So we looked at some different arrangements as part of that approach, moving the nursery to the north, and also retaining maybe not a multi-storey community building, but maybe one with housing above it. We then developed a sort of preferred option after the following workshop where in essence the nursery stays on the north part of the site with two-storey housing above it, and then we have a building here on the corner of Audley Drive and Evelyn Road, which is mainly community use all on the ground floor, so it's sort of shopfront style kind of positive uses on that ground floor with some meeting rooms above, and then housing wrapping around the rest of the site with a kind of generous central garden in the middle. And this represented a kind of, after a series of iterations, represented a kind of a reasonable first go at kind of a design for the site. It meant we could achieve 26 homes, including quite a lot of family homes, which was a requirement for local people. And we also went for 35% affordable homes to try and meet as many local needs as possible. There'd be a mixture of rented and shared ownership homes. In terms of the community space itself, as I say, it was set on its ground floor and the nursery to the north. Some of these would be terraced houses, mirroring kind of what's across the other side of the road here at Audley Drive. We also moved the buildings away from the back of Julia Garfield Mews to give these guys actually a better outlook to look out onto a high wall of the side of the foundation's existing building. So this gives a sense of kind of the view looking down Evelyn Road with a sort of corner block. It's kind of more of a statement here where you can see the community uses at first and ground floor, and then 2 to 2.5 stories above that of housing, and that drops right down back down to the sort of similar levels of the existing street further to the east. And then along Wesley Avenue, again, this is kind of looking at, this is where the existing substation is, roughly speaking, where I'm pointing at the moment. On the ground floor, there'll be a nursery with access to these 2-story houses above, or maisonettes above the nursery. In terms of the central garden, that's a really key part of this, and because at the moment the open space for the community centre is very, very limited and quite poor. But we thought we'd actually produce really quite positive garden space, which would be accessed directly from these much more flexible and positive activity rooms that we created as part of the ground floor. The foyer would be much bigger and much more generous. There would be a small kitchen, which would also allow for people to sell coffee out into the public, but also perhaps this foyer could sort of represent a kind of cafe type use, perhaps as part of the foundation's operation. So this is much more about having a welcoming space that you move into from the street. And then you can move through that space and into a series of garden spaces to the rear. We also thought the nursery at the moment doesn't really have much of an outdoor space, and we think it's really important, so they can actually benefit from a south-facing green space that's going to be full of sunshine for much of the day and much of the year. So yeah, that was the kind of approach that we took to the local authority. And we got a formal response back, basically, which was kind of helpful, saying that they actually support the idea of a residential-led mixed use for this particular site. They definitely really like the idea of much better community nursery uses. We need to make a better justification of why we're changing the format and making sure that we're slightly reducing the amount of community space that we're providing, and that's because we can actually use it much more efficiently and because of the halls I talked about elsewhere. So we need to do a better justification for that. They were keen to see the kind of design moves that we've made around kind of addressing the street rather than having these large kind of car park open spaces. But we needed to address some of the detail around where the building lines were, and we welcome that bit of feedback. And they also really supported the idea of having a mix of private and affordable housing. We also talked to them about having a more bespoke offer, and we'd need to obviously go through some more work to justify that as well. So all in all, it was a productive meeting and productive feedback that we got back there in July. Yeah, that's been a sort of big milestone for the project, because it kind of now means that we have some confidence in, if we did submit an application, the kind of issues that we have to deal with as part of that process. So rather than hearing me talk the whole time, I'm actually going to hand over to Chris to talk briefly about the finances as they currently stand and some of the issues that we're facing on that side. Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So for those people who are in the development group, so Christian and others, this won't be sort of new information, but we thought it was a reminder of the financial plan for the project, and where that's sort of been driven from. So the first thing to say is, other people might have heard this being said before, this is very much about the financial plan for the redevelopment, the building project itself, not for the foundation's operating. So obviously the foundation at the moment runs the centre and runs the dock at Royal Wharf, generates revenue, I think, from some activities to subsidise others, and broadly speaking, breaks even. What we're talking about here is not the running of the new centre. This is actually bringing the new centre about. This is funding the construction. And what we're trying to do is, and this is perhaps not as easy as it sounds, we're trying to create a balance between funding the new community centre and funding the new nursery, which obviously have quite a significant cost involved in them, but also in trying to do as much affordable housing as we reasonably can. And the affordable housing likewise has a cost involved, and it has a value, let's say, which is less than its cost in some cases. So we've got these two factors, these two aspects, which are kind of putting a pressure on the financial plan, the need to do the new community centre, make it really great, but also to do a really meaningful amount of affordable housing. So that's our comparison here. The total costs of the scheme that Dan's just explained are in the region of about 13 million, is what our surveyor is estimating. And that breaks down between about just short of 10 million on the 26 homes, and about 3.6 on the new community facilities. We have to compare that to the values then of these different uses to understand whether they're whether they're breaking even, which we need them to do, or whether they're making a loss or making a surplus. So the values for the housing, and this is assuming we're working with 35% affordable, which is the planning policy, are around 11.7. There is also potentially a value in the nursery. So as Dan said, the nursery at the moment is run on a room hire basis, so it's a pack away nursery. But the Tina who runs the nursery wants to take a permanent space on, and that would have a value. So we can assume that there'd be that would be part of the financial equation as well. At the moment, the scheme is generating a gap, essentially a loss of around 1.8 million between the total costs and the total values. That hasn't changed since the workshops that we held earlier in the year. But we're currently trying to firm it up, so we're taking some formal valuation advice on the dwellings and on the nursery to confirm that. And it's worth saying first thing to say is it's not unusual that a project which is trying to provide so much community space should be financially challenging. That's sort of almost intrinsic to this project. There's a big challenge there. There are a range of ways of dealing with that gap, either by funding it through other funding sources other than just the housing on the site, or through reducing the costs so that the gap reduces, or probably a combination of the two things, combination of controlling the costs and bringing in more funding. One of the sort of leading options, or the most sort of obvious and locally relevant options for funding, is what's called the Good Growth Fund, which is a fund around regeneration and building up the economy, and building community infrastructure in the docks area as part of what's called the local enterprise zone. And so Dan will be able to chip in on that. But there are also a range of other funding opportunities, including a discussion that Dan's recently been having with the National Lottery, who have a community space fund, and potential funding for the housing from the GLA, from Newham Council. So this is almost, you can imagine this is a snapshot in time of where we are now. And our challenge is to bridge the £1.8 million gap. So probably back over to you, Dan, I think.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so we're just going to touch on sort of delivery in terms of some options that we're currently looking at for delivery. In all scenarios, the whole point of doing this, or one of the big points of doing this, is that the foundation has a much better community and nursery provision at the end. And so we'd obviously seek to retain that. But the question then comes, what about the housing? And how does that work? And at the moment, we're looking through a number of options on the housing. We haven't made any decisions yet. We're just at the beginning of that process. I'll just outline those to you now. So one option is to look at selling the housing elements to a third party. It could be a housing association, it could be a developer who takes those homes on and then sells some of them, keeps some of them for affordable housing, with an agreement with the foundation that we are part of that, the nomination to those homes. The second option is to look at just selling the market housing element only to developer and retaining the affordable element. The third option is doing more of a sort of profit share or like development share with developer RP. And the last option is for the foundation itself to take on more development risk. So there's a pretty broad spectrum of options there. The foundation itself will retain in all options the head lease on this land and will be the kind of custodian, should we say, of the scheme as a whole. So yeah, there's not a huge amount to say other than that we are looking at a range of options. So
is it worth just chipping one thing in there, Dan?
Yeah,
just to add to that, I think the reason for this exercise to work out how, what we've talked about so far is what we're trying to create, and this is the how to get there. So who to involve, who brings the money in, who takes the risk. And this responds really to a question that somebody asked, and I can't remember who it was in one of the workshops, around, is West Silvertown Foundation a housing developer? Is it becoming one? Is it the right organisation to take the kind of risk that's involved in the sums we've just been talking about? The purpose of this is to say, okay, there's more than one way of doing this, which doesn't put all of that risk with the foundation, but also doesn't, let's say, distract the foundation from doing what it does well, which is all that stuff that Helen started with. But likewise, the foundation needs to be keeping a certain amount of control to make sure that all of the stuff we've been talking about, high quality community space, new 60-place children's nursery, sustainability, and community preference, community priority for the housing is secured. So there's a certain amount of control that's needed to make sure all these great ideas are secured and aren't lost. So this is about trying to work out what the right balance is between controlling those benefits and taking the risk of this project, which is obviously is complex and has different pieces to it. So just wanted to explain why we're doing this.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we can also touch on this in the Q&A as well. So So it's not just about this site. I did mention the idea that this is a network of different things that are happening across the whole neighbourhood, and most of us having been stuck in our neighbourhoods, the kind of quality neighbourhoods were really important. So we've been looking at improvements we can make in the shorter term. And on that note, I might hand over back to Helen to talk about Britannia Village Green and some of the work that she's been leading on that as well.
Sam? Yeah, thank you. And hopefully a lot of you saw the Citizens Assembly grant application that we put out over the summer, and hopefully many of you were able to vote for us as part of that. So for people that don't know, the Newham Citizens Assembly has priorities voted for by residents for each community neighbourhood, and our community neighbourhood is Beckton and Royal Docks by local residents, and one of those was to improve indoor and outdoor spaces. So because of that, we put in this application to for 20 grand to start on some work on the Britannia Village Green. And when we did our consultation back in January, when we did a public survey, many people commented on Britannia Village Green and the need for improvements to it and things that we would like to see happening to it. And so we've put in an application to get the ball rolling with that. And thank you if you did vote for us, because yeah, that money was secured. And that we kind of essentially have 20 grand to start on works for this. And the things that we are aiming to look at is starting off with some real quick win work. So things such as the mud path, which you can all see on your screens, to get that to be a hard surface path. I know many people struggle with that, especially in winter, whether it's just that your footwear is not suitable for it or actually more dangerous and people end up slipping and hurting themselves. But that will be what we expect to be a really big priority coming out of this, is a real quick win. But then longer term, bigger changes as well. And what we envisage those changes being is more seating and some play equipment for children. However, we don't want to run away and make decisions without people in the community being able to feed into it. So what we've done so far is appointed Groundworks, who this is kind of their bread and butter. This is what they do, working with communities to improve spaces, particularly focused around outdoor spaces and play equipment. And they're going to be working with us to bring this project to fruition. And we've also got L&Q to sign a document saying that they will work with us to see this through and to get something happening on this green, to be transforming it. And so those have both been signed and are agreed. And by the end of October, we're expecting in the second half of October, we'll be launching our public consultation around the bigger changes that we want to see on that green. So, and we envisage off the back of that being able to do quick things, hopefully like paving the path, if the public agree that that's what needs doing immediately. I'm sure that people will. We aim for that to be done literally this winter to get that done. And then for the longer term things to think about, such as play equipment and more seating arrangements, how it's all laid out will be something that we'll be then making sure that we've got the community's ideas on funding the rest of the money, because that will come to a lot more than £20,000, and getting on with that as soon as we possibly can. Another thing that we've also been doing is working with the GLA, who have been looking to plant more trees around the area. You might remember it was pre-COVID 2019, they started doing some consultation around trees and where we would like them around the docks. And again, Britannia Village Green was a place that came up several times as part of that. There were some initial issues getting that off the ground, which meant that they missed the first round of tree planting for the Village Green. But we've been working with them and L&Q to make sure that this time it really does happen. And so again, the GLA are currently commissioning people to do that piece of work. And the plan is for several new trees to be planted on the Village Green. And I've spoken to them about which places on the green are currently well used and which ones aren't. And they'll be looking to get trees planted there over the winter and early spring next year, so that by this time next year, we've got several new trees on that green for extra shade and to increase biodiversity there. So please do, we'll send out via the MailChimp for everyone that's signed up, and also on our social media and everything. And we will, give as much notice as we possibly can about the upcoming events in October. That we are planning for the second half of October to really launch the consultation on what changes people want to see there. Great, that's the green. Back to you, Dan.
And just to say, as a last kind of point, really, is, you know, it's great to see everyone here tonight, and some people that I've not met as part of this project so far. So thank you for coming. To those, if there's new people, we'd love you to be involved. And we're looking at to try and set up two parallel groups. We'd like to continue with the existing development advisory group, which has met quite a few, 3 times already, as I say, and that will be the group that will also help us with the BV Green work as well as the wider community. So just put your name down, or just drop Helen an email, and we can get you on a list, and we can support you in whichever way you would be helpful to make sure we can get your input. We're also interested in setting up a separate parallel group around housing issues. So if you've been affected particularly by housing issues, or if you're interested in particularly interested in actually moving to one of the new homes, then we'd really like you to be part of the project and get involved. So really emphasize, even if you're not quite sure, just get in touch and find out a bit more what's involved. I know sometimes it can feel a bit daunting to join some of these things, but you know, we're going to try and make it as a positive experience as possible, and we'll certainly help you every step of the way. So in terms of sort of next things, just this is the last wrap-up thing, because we also do want to hear from you as well. So it's we're going on some visits on Friday to look at other projects which have tried to do similar things around building new community centres and housing. Appreciate for many people on this call, it's very late notice. If you do want to come, just let us know, let Helen know, let myself or Chris know, or put your name in the chat. We're also, as Helen said, we're going to be doing some more detailed participation second half of October around the Village Green. A lot more work on the finances to try and make those stack up. We're also developing an agreement between all different landowners on this site, which includes the GLA. Rosie's here tonight. BVG, Ian's a member of that board as well, over the next few weeks. And then we're also trying to get the money together to actually commence the next stage, which is kind of detailed design and planning stage, taking on board all the things that the local authorities said, and also ongoing engagement we talked about as well. So hopefully, you know, I appreciate we talk quite a long time, but that gives you an overview of where we are at the moment. And yeah, just really look forward to hearing if anyone's got any questions, or points or things that we haven't really explained very well. Appreciate, you know, we probably use words and jargon which, you know, is not very inclusive. So do pick us up and say, actually, what the hell did you mean by that?